move it over to the next slide. So some ground rules for today. I think this is also something that is important when we are establishing online meetings and events. Participate. Turn on your videos. We understand sometimes you're eating because it's, you know, during lunchtime like today, or and you're in the middle of something, but at least when you are talking, if you are able to turn your video so that people are able to see your nonverbal cues and communications, will be helpful. Stay muted when not speaking. This will limit background noises, and we are able to hear the person speaking better. And the last one is step up, step back. This means we encourage you to speak up, participate fully to the best of your ability, and to step back if you are taking up you know, a lot of space, to make sure that you allow others to have that space to participate and to speak up, and kind of monitoring yourself to make sure that there is equal participation amongst all who are here today. Thank you. All right, so a few things on the agenda. We have an icebreaker, and then we're going to dive into the training here. Key elements of what a good virtual meeting is, considerations for hybrid meetings, and a deep dive into the platforms, like the technical skills of Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and then information on WebEx. Since there is two of us, we will do a deep dive today on Zoom and Microsoft Teams, and we will provide additional information on WebEx at a later time. So with that, I will kick it off to Britton.
Awesome. So as you may know, a lot of you kind of shared in the chat actually that your meetings did increase engagement when they moved to virtual, but slowly but surely they started to lose engagement. So we're going to talk a little bit about engagement and like why it's important. And one of the ways that I really start in my meetings, start getting people to engage very quickly, is by asking silly questions. I like these because they get people starting to think about things and thinking about how they want to engage. So in the chat, this is the best way I do it with a larger group. So we have about 15 people. I like people to use the chat. In the chat, tell me, what is your favorite type of water? It could be to drink, to swim in, to cook with, etc. You can answer the question however you would like. And so I will model it just because I'll show you kind of how I would engage, and then you can either raise your hand actually to let us know if you want to speak off mute, or put it in the chat. So my favorite type of water is frozen water that has melted, because it is ice cold and it is great. Any cold water is perfect. I'm going to pass it to Meron, who's going to tell us about her favorite water.
I like spring water, and I like how people are adding room temperature too. I do like room temperature water because I cannot stand cold water. And so yeah, because it is clear. To me, it doesn't have that taste. Believe it or not, a lot of water has taste, and I can't stand it. So spring water to me is tasteless, and that's what water should taste like. Nothing, just liquid in your mouth. So. Yeah.
Awesome. If there's anyone that wants to go off mute and share with us their favorite type of water, I would invite you to do that. I saw someone talk about sugar-free strawberry watermelon flavoring. Flavored water is great. Amanda highlighted unpolluted, which is a good goal for all of us. So yeah, feel free to go off mute if you want to share. Otherwise, we will move on. Ooh, deep salt water with scuba stuff running. That's awesome. Well, so thank you for engaging. As you may know, a lot of people kind of check out during Zoom meetings. So things like this, they're very easy access points to kind of teaching people and showing people how we want them to engage with us. Which brings us to this topic of like, what are the key elements to a good virtual meeting? So while we can provide like a list of things, I would also kind of encourage you all to literally Google this sentence. So if you Google key elements to a good virtual meeting, you will find articles upon articles talking about how people have found virtual, how they have found best practices for virtual engagement. And you can narrow it to things like nonprofits, unions, a lot of different things. So I would encourage you to Google that and like kind of think about, how you can put those tips into your work. However, I wanted to, instead of providing like a list of what we feel are the key elements, we wanted to have more of a discussion. So we know that everyone here has had some sort of virtual meeting, whether they are in a lot of virtual meetings or only, 1 or 2 a week. So while we are going to get into some of the nuts and bolts of Zoom or Teams, we know that like just knowing how to use the software doesn't necessarily mean that the meeting is engaging. Just because you can start the meeting and share a Zoom PowerPoint doesn't necessarily mean people are paying attention. So in the chat, let me know. You can either raise your hand and go off mute as I call you, or you can in the chat say, what are some of the key elements to a good virtual meeting? Think about your favorite past meetings and things like that. So feel free to add that in the chat and we'll kind of keep going with our discussion. Tamara highlighted a written agenda, and that is really great. To add some context of why that's important is when people know what they're getting into, they know that it's worth their time. If they are going to show up to a local meeting and know that nothing interesting or relevant to them is going to happen, they may not show up to that. But if they know that they're going to be talking about a discussion that's really relevant to them, like room temperature, building safety, workload, they're more confident in joining. Nancy highlighted the interactive visuals, other aids, and Tim also talked about the use of visuals. That is really great. Oftentimes our Zoom meetings tend to be a little bit of like black boxes engaging in the chat, kind of like we are now. But the use of like PowerPoint to add visuals and a more intentional facilitator allows people to start really engaging in the content instead of just kind of checking out. Phil highlighted the quality audio. So no matter if people are in the meeting room or in person or online, they can be heard. That is really important. We're going to be talking about some of the points of like hybrid versus fully online versus fully in person. And one of the big things when it comes to making hybrid successful is actually making sure that everyone can hear. Shocker, right? Kevin talked about, he likes the ones with real-time interactive polling. Those things are really great for asking, and engaging with people and kind of hearing where they're at. All right, awesome. These are really great. I think Nancy highlighted pre-planning and kind of putting time aside to engage. And I think that's really great. Tamara also highlighted as well, asking questions and beginning with an icebreaker. Exactly, yeah. So when we're talking about virtual meetings, it's also really important to think about, what are some of the worst virtual meetings that we've attended? And the reason we do this is because if we're talking about like a sliding scale and the best is over here and the worst is over here, we'll probably land somewhere in between that scale, right? And we want to make sure we land on the better side of the scale. So it's good to start thinking about what are the goalposts? So think about the absolute worst virtual meeting you have attended, especially if you can focus on the last maybe 2 months. So we've used virtual tools for a while. And so we all should kind of know how to use them by now. So think about the worst one you've had recently. Why was it the worst virtual meeting and what was missing from it? So again, feel free to raise your hands and I'll call on you to go off mute, or you can type it in the chat. And I'll kind of call it out as I see it. All right, Nancy. Oh, go ahead, Genza.
Yeah. I have a dilemma because for accessibility purpose, you have to use, you have to read whatever is in the slide.
Mhm.
But normally when people stick into the slide and nothing out of the slide comes out, I get bored. So I don't know.
Yeah. No, you're totally right, right? When someone's just reading what's on the slide and they're not really adding anything to it, it's pretty boring. You could just read an audiobook at that point.
But
Uh,
accessibility requires that to happen for captioning purpose.
oh, yes, definitely. Yeah. Oh, awesome. So Tim highlighted something that's really important for us to highlight, which is when someone is managing the meeting and presenting alone without help, it is really hard to manage both the chat, the participants, the Zoom video, and the sharing of screen at the same time. Some of us can do it, some of us are really bad at it. So when someone can't do that and also can't assign someone else to support them, it can be really hard. Yes, Bruce highlighted that good humor helps. This is a little bit different than like what we're talking about, but one of the best ways to navigate like kind of a mess up on Zoom or in a virtual meeting is by making jokes about it. It does kind of lighten the mood and let people get kind of more engaged. And Tamara highlighted meeting support is essential, so it's definitely something that tends to be missing from some of those really bad Zoom meetings. That's a good one, Nancy. Thank you. Yeah. What are other things that have made virtual meetings really hard, either to engage or just to like want to be here?
I guess on my end, I'll just jump right in. On my end, when I'm facilitating meetings, it's really hard for me to engage when no one else is on camera, where I'm staring at a bunch of boxes. So I like to invite people to turn on their cameras. And here I am, I don't have my camera. Seriously.
Hey, we see your
So
face.
yeah, I like to
Wonderful.
invite people. Yeah, so that helps.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And I think, yeah, it can be very easy to lose like the wind in your sails if you're just kind of talking to yourself. Awesome, cool. Well, let's keep moving so I can make sure I can actually see my screen. So if you, who here has been in like a Zoom meeting that was all business? So it was like a 2-hour meeting and you're basically just reading back what could have been in an email. Aren't those kind of exhausting? Yeah, so I'm seeing a couple head shakes, a couple nods. So and a thumbs up, heck yeah. So that's one of the things that we tend to miss when we're talking about the Zoom meetings that are really rough for us, right? Is those meetings that have, there's nothing interesting that necessarily happens. They're just kind of going through work and it's all business. There's no time for chit chat, right? And one of the big things we often miss from our local meetings is that chit chat. So that's why it's really important that we kind of add those more human aspects to our Zoom meetings. All right. So awesome. Apologies, I'm still kind of working on my Zoom setup. So when we are talking about virtual meetings and how to kind of engage in them, it's really important that we learn about how do we kind of read a Zoom room. So this is one of my like more fun rants that my coworkers get to hear a lot, where what I talk about is how virtual meetings lose a little bit of that human aspect. So when humans are engaging with each other, we use visual cues like facial expression, body language, vocal cues, things like that to tell us, is this conversation going well? Is this person engaging with me? And sometimes it can be really hard if people have their videos off or their mics off the whole time to see that what you are doing is landing, right? Whether it's a training or a meeting or something like that. So it's important for us to talk about, how do we read a room so that we can see members are feeling and reacting to this meeting. So you all have run virtual meetings, and oftentimes what I've noticed is we hold ourselves back from encouraging people to turn on their video or come off mute. So like, let's be super real. A lot of this training will kind of boil down to having the confidence to do something, knowing that it might be a little awkward and uncomfortable to ask a question and then sit there for 5 seconds quietly, but that it still really makes a difference because people slowly but surely engage. So there's this thing that we actually, Frank and I, who was one of the other trainers who was not able to be here today, we call it the Vernita effect. And Vernita, I know you're here, so I hope you don't feel called out. But what Vernita does at her local or Region 5 meetings that she's a part of is she engages with people actively. So she's fantastic in living with comfort and asking people to come on video. She calls on people and sometimes asks questions like, hey, how are you doing? How are your kids? I haven't heard from you in a while. And what's really funny about this is it engages people in an authentic way that we have kind of lost during Zoom. So Vernita, I hope you don't feel called out, but this is one of the things that I think makes you like a wonderful leader because you have adapted to virtual meetings. So in a local meeting that was in person, it's totally normal for us to say, hey, Maron, how is your dog? Is your dog doing okay? Like, did he, do well at the pet store the other day? In virtual meetings, not so much. So we have to figure out how we input that kind of conversation and chit chat and community building in the work we're doing. A couple ways we can do this is we can use the chat. The chat is not always the most accessible thing. Unfortunately, if someone has a screen reader, it can be really distracting for the screen reader to keep reading what's in the chat. But it can be a good way to get engagement. Emojis are really great. So if someone has their video off, they can use the emoji button to like tell us how they're feeling, right? They can laugh, they can cry, they can have an angry face, they can clap. And those are really great ways to kind of tell us exactly, Genza, exactly what you're doing, to tell us how they're feeling without necessarily having their video on. I am a big fan of that. I have so much fun with the emojis because it tells people in the meeting how I'm feeling and what I'm doing. You can also use the raise hand function. This is also in the reactions section, and it indicates that you want to talk, go off mute, something like that. And again, it just gives us the opportunity to really engage people in a different way. So if you took nothing from my big long spiel, the thing that I want you to think about is what are the social cues and social interactions that we miss now that we are living in kind of a virtual world? And how can we make like synthetic versions or fake versions that we still engage with virtually? And they may look a little different, but they have the same outcome. So I know that that was a lot, so feel free to let me know if you have questions or comments in the chat, and I'll kind of chat a little bit with you. But I'm going to pass it over to Maron, who's going to talk about hybrid meetings and what we should be considering when we are thinking about holding hybrid meetings.
Thank you, Brayton. So yes, that's a good way to get into hybrid meetings, right? Especially now that most places are thinking about, going back into the office with the option of work, continuing to telework. So what is that going to look like for everyone? With that in mind, I just have a few questions here. Have you participated in a hybrid meeting before? And what worked well and what hasn't, or if you have any preferences. I know that we're utilizing the chat too, but I also would like to hear from people who are here to see, if you've had any experience with that. While you're thinking about that, I can tell you about my experiences in a hybrid settings. It could be confusing. It can be technical difficulties happen. Sometimes you can't, tell who's talking and who's not, especially if you are in a virtual setting and you feel forgotten if people are not monitoring the chat or if no one is really facilitating between the online folks and the in-person attendees. So have you had any experience in that?
Well, so, go ahead, Genza.
Okay, I have experience both as a user and as well as supporting this situation, especially high flex, hybrid being flexible, high flex. And as Meron indicated, sometimes one individual may not be enough in hybrid situation, because if you are running both face-to-face and online, someone has to check what's happening on the chat, what's happening with the reactions, because if you are talking to face, there is a chance to be distracted with what is happening in front of you, and refocusing yourself may be difficult to the online. So I say it's very labor intensive, because you need additional support for that. But in terms of usage, from my experience, I mean, it's helpful. It may need ahead of time preparation if you are especially the one who's running it. And if you are online, then it's better to have someone on face-to-face linked to you. If you miss something, then you can email that person before, or chat to that person to verify and clarify things.
Absolutely. Thank you, Genzab. Yes, that is one of the points that we will be talking to. And yes, it is intensive. But when you keep, when you think about the goal of the meeting in mind, then, certain things that you can do may be, worth it. And I think that also increases participation and commitment from those who are attending the meetings. And also Nancy said, being inclusive and sharing all information, inside comments from physical attendees that would not be caught by virtual attendees. So absolutely, these are all of the things that are necessary, right? You need to have a person that is designated to monitor chats and relay information from online attendees to in-person attendees. And that's, so in thinking about that, some of the things to consider are, oh, that's a good question, Brighton. While you guys are thinking about that, I'll go ahead and just tell, say a few more considerations for the hybrid meeting, right? All attendees, must be on equal footing, right? Participating in the same way. And that's how you make sure that everyone is included and feels, belonged in the meeting. These virtual meetings have been helpful for introverts. I think during the pandemic, it has encouraged people to participate more. And how do we continue to do that during the hybrid settings too? Because those are, I think, the ones who are going to remain teleworking potentially, if they have the option. And so how do we continue to have those people engaged? The chat functionality is definitely important. It can be leveraged for information sharing, for questions in real time. And also think about technology glitches and stronger relationship building for the hybrid settings also. And so with that, we'll go into some roles and some things that we can do to make the hybrid setting more effective. So I know these are maybe not in order, but the first thing you want to do, okay, before I go into the roles, I want to make sure that I see Nancy. I see. I will go ahead. Oh, were you going to say something?
Hi, Maren, this is Nance. What I was going to say is right at the beginning, when it came to negotiations, based on what Christine told us, it was as though we didn't deserve to be at the table. We needed to go back to work and mind our own business, and we didn't deserve raises. And there was no common ground. There was no effort to respect our work, treat us as though we deserved what we were asking for, as well as recognizing our efforts to keep people safe and do our jobs throughout COVID. It was as though we were disposable. And that is definitely, as we know from the teacher strike and possibly future nurses strikes, that is not the way to treat employees. Not right now. Thank you.
No, absolutely. I thank you for that, Nancy. I appreciate your perspective on that. And I think that is something that we can discuss. Maybe we can connect afterwards with you, Britton, and I, and we can continue to talk about that, if that's okay, Nancy.
Can I come here? Actually, this is helpful for everybody of us because at a smaller scale, we have to engage with supervisors in case, for example, as a steward, grievances come. And sometimes people are tricky by bringing you the emotional aspect. They can distract you from what you want to pass or what you intend to argue on. So the virtual aspect especially is susceptible because they can easily shut you off. If you are in front, you have a tendency to re-engage. But in a virtual environment, that re-engagement depends on how smooth and how that agenda is managed. So it's good for everybody actually how to re-engage when leaders or maybe lawmakers try to push you out by picking on emotional aspects so that they will distract you.
Yeah, thank you, Ganzab. Miss Lolita, sorry, go ahead.
Hi, first of all, I need to apologize. My camera is crazy, but I do have the MAPE strong. So I am MAPE strong. But I'm new to all this. I'm a new steward. I think I've been like a real good steward for the last 2 weeks because I've been really studying my contract. So I don't really know what I would need, you know? And so these kind of meetings and listening to individuals been very helpful. So that's my 2 points. So I don't share a lot. It's just because I haven't done it before and I'm just trying to learn and I'm just listening. But I'm here and I'm MAPE strong.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. So what roles would we need for the hybrid meetings? I know we discussed a little bit about this, but to touch base on this, so we can get into the next point is checking your tech. Do you have the right technology? Do you have video and audio working? Is the chat working? Can online participants see who is in the room? Can everyone in the room see online participants? There may be a technology upgrade needed sometimes, but when you have a hybrid meeting, it is good to display who is online in a big screen, if possible, so that it feels like they are in the room with you and they have a larger presence. Another one is to designate a role, like Ganzab mentioned earlier, is to have, so there's 3 parts, right? And so yes, it is labor intensive, but I think it also increases the participation point. So like the meeting planner doesn't have to do all of the work. And so you can have a meeting facilitator who is running the meeting. You can have a chat moderator. It can be anyone from the participants, right? That is in person who is going to look at the chat if people are raising their hands, whatever reactions that may be, that can say, oh, hey, we have a person that wants to speak online. Oh, we have a question in the chat, or we have a comment in the chat, and being able to relay that message as if the other participants are in the room. And also having a note taker, I think that goes without saying that, you know, we typically have note takers. And so making sure that we have note takers that are able to get all the information together so that it is able to be sent out to all participants later on. I think when it comes to accessibility also, this is really important. Like the chat reader is not on, so the chat might be problematic, but that's also why you have a moderator who is going to relay that message, but also having a note taker will help get all of that information together so that it is accessible for those who need it after the meeting, so that they do have the information everyone has. So another thing to add with the role of the moderator and the facilitator is really taking turns, right? And so sometimes it is easy to forget those who are online if most of the participants are in person. And so making sure that we take turns. So we allow people from the virtual world to say, hey, it's your turn now, you can say something. And then having in-person attendees speak and kind of vice versa. I think that will make everyone feel included. They belong in the meeting, and that they are, you know, able to participate to the best that they can in a hybrid world without being there. And so, yeah, that is my spiel. Do you have any questions or thoughts on this? All right. Then we can go on to the next point.
All right.
Yep, go ahead,
Go ahead.
Braden.
Awesome. As you can see, it is very important for us to be flexible as we interrupt each other all the time. Yes, so we are actually going to do a deep dive into some virtual platforms. We were hoping to do Zoom, Teams, and WebEx, but there's only 2 of us today. So we are going to be sending out kind of a follow-up email. It'll have, I'll do my best to include the recording, the PowerPoints, and then we'll have some resources for WebEx and a few other things. But what we're going to do is from like 12:40-ish or so, we are going to, until about 12:55, we are going to be in breakout rooms where you will receive pretty much like a rough deep dive into some of these virtual platforms. So we're going to talk about how to start and stop meetings, admit attendees, how to do votes and motions, sharing your screen, facilitating small group breakouts, and a few other things. So if you are unable to attend both, but you want to, just let us know and we'll try and get the resources to you. But ultimately, I would encourage you to pick the platform that your local uses the most, whether it's your local or the organizing team you work with. Pick that one so that you can bring this information back to your local. The way we're going to do that is I'm going to go to our breakout rooms and I'm going to open them all, and you will see 2 kinds. There will be the Teams info session and the Zoom info session. So what you're going to do is you are going to have the opportunity, if you click on breakouts, you are going to have the opportunity to join specific ones. You can either join the team or the Zoom. Once you are in there, myself and Maron will give you a quick rundown on some of these tech tools, and then we'll come back for the last 5 minutes to do a report out. What's up, Miss Lolita? How can I help you?
Okay, just for clarification, you want us to pick the one that our local usually uses, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure I heard that correctly. All right.
Totally, yeah. Awesome. Is there anyone that is not able to access the breakout button? All right, well, I don't see anyone. So Maron, you can jump over to yours if you want. I'll stick around here for like a moment or two. So my Teams folks, I will see you in just a few moments, and then we will get started. All right, Maron, I'm gonna send you over. Phil, oh, Phil's gone. Nancy and Bruce, where do you two want to go? Zoom, please, for Nancy. Perfect. All right, Bruce, where would you like to go, my friend? All right, well, I'm not sure if you can hear me, so I'm going to put you in the Teams breakout session with me, and then we'll go from there. Sounds good. I'm going to jump over here. Oh. Just so you know, which I'm sure you already probably know, this part of the meeting is also recorded. So let's get started. Maybe if my technology will work. Perfect. All right, so real quick, while we're here, raise your hand either with the raise hand function or just like by going like this. Who has used Teams before? Okay. Cool. Awesome. So Teams is one of my favorite platforms because I find it pretty intuitive, but it's also pretty boring and like not as colorful compared to Zoom. So I can understand why people would utilize Zoom. Oftentimes our Teams folks are the people that use Teams are Minute people use it a lot, Minnesota State use it a lot, and DNR people use it a lot. So today we're going to talk about how to like schedule meetings, start, stop them, admit attendees, and things like that. And what I'm going to encourage you all to do is really, as you find questions that aren't able to be answered, or you have questions that you want to answer, I encourage you to Google it first. And this isn't kind of like it's your responsibility to learn. It's more of, it probably took me about 15 minutes to make this whole entire PowerPoint, and I knew nothing about Teams. And I did that by just Googling some basic questions, and I was able to get a pretty comprehensive list of resources. So let's run through it. So the first question, the first and most important thing is, how do you schedule a meeting? So what you're going to do is you can either open Microsoft Teams or you can open like a Microsoft Calendar. And from the Calendar tab, you can select New Meeting at the top of your screen. So we see the Meet Now option, which is you can just meet them right now, or a new Teams meeting, which will coincide with a calendar time. Then you will name your meeting. You'll enter the name, email, or phone number to like add participants. The best way to do this if you're sending out an invite for a local meeting is just to copy paste all of the emails. Then you can fill out the start and end fields to schedule the meeting either all day, or you can set it for a specific time, specific location. Once you save it, the meeting is scheduled. And once the meeting is scheduled, you can actually copy the link. Copying the link button will allow you to copy it and share it with other people. And this will also show on your calendar. All right, so when you start or stop a meeting, so if you are the owner of the meeting, once you start it, you will come to a page that looks like this. So once you click the link, you'll be directed to this waiting room where you can check your audio, turn your video on, and click to join when you're ready. You're going to click this button over here on kind of the lower left hand or lower right hand side that says Join Now. Once the person who owns the Teams link opens the meeting, you will be into the meeting. If you are the owner of the meeting, you can just press Join Now. Once you are in the meeting, you can actually let people in from the breakout or from the waiting room. So you may get a notification on your screen that's like, Tim is in the waiting room, and you can click to admit them. To end the meeting or leave, you just need to click the upper right hand button, red button in the corner. You can either leave if you're not the host, or you can end the meeting if you are the host. So if you're the host and you just want to leave the meeting, but you don't want to end it, you just need to make sure that you're clicking leave instead of end. And then I know, because I'm talking about a lot of like technical things, I may have questions. So feel free to put them in the chat and I'll try and address them as I go. Because I don't want to run too quickly through this, but I also know that you all have experiences with different technologies. So I don't want to assume that you don't know, anything. Alrighty. So there are a couple different ways people can make motions. And this is probably the most important thing for local meetings when we're talking about things like Robert's rules, making motions, voting, things like that. So there's two main ways to do votes or motions. You can either use reactions or a poll. So I struggled to find out how to find the button to create a poll. So I'm actually going to include a link later about how to run a poll and what you need. But for this meeting, I'm actually going to focus on the raised hand function because that's the one I see the most commonly. So once a vote or motion is called, you can ask people to vote in favor by raising their hands. They can do this by going to the reactions function here. And then clicking on like raised hand, it'll be probably on the far right side. Once people have already voted and you want to run an aye vote or a nay vote, I'm sorry, you can lower all the hands by going over to participants, clicking on the dots, and then clicking on this word here that says lower all hands. And the reason this is helpful is because it gives you a pretty good visualization of how people are voting, and it's pretty simple to find. All right, so as you all can see, sharing our screen is something that's super duper important for making our meetings engaging and making sure people kind of are able to follow along, but also read what we're doing. So if you are going to share your screen, on the top bar of the Teams meeting, you are going to look over and click share. It'll look very similar for both Zoom and Teams. It's this like upwards arrow, usually in a box. On Zoom, it's green. On Teams, it is white. Once you find the screen that you want to share and click on it, you'll be sharing the screen. I really encourage people to do a couple things. If you are going to share your screen, but maybe say you have something important for your work on another screen, it's really important that you make sure that is a separate screen from what you're sharing. So say, for example, you have some really important financial data for the education department. It's probably not a great idea to have that on the same tab as the screen you are sharing. I would also encourage you to ask attendees to see if they can see what you are sharing, just to make sure you're sharing the right thing. Hey, Tim, I see your hand up. What's up?
Is there a way to share two screens
I
at the
believe
same time?
I believe so. Usually there might be a conflict when there's two people, but because I can't give you like a super direct answer, what I would say is like just try it. Like so at the next Teams meeting you're in, it's totally appropriate to say, hey, I want to see if we can both share the screen. Can you share your screen and I'll share mine and we'll see what happens.
Or
that's
for me, like I have two monitors.
Ooh,
Can I
okay.
share? Can I share both of them?
Yes, definitely. I've been able to do that both on Zoom and Teams. And as long as your monitors are both set up, usually it can kind of identify that you have two monitors. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I like questions. It makes me remember I'm not like alone just talking to myself. So to create breakout rooms or small group breakouts in Teams, which is very similar again to Zoom, you look for the rooms button on the top bar of your screen. Once you click on it, you can either create them or assign them or assign people to it, kind of like we did today where people either opted in or I just moved someone if they couldn't get in, or you can let people randomly be assigned. The way I like to use randomly assigned breakout rooms is by using it for like a discussion question or a get to know you kind of icebreaker activity. So then people aren't picking their best friend, they're just being randomly put into a room with someone to know. All right, so let's see, do I have another slide after this? Because then maybe I can tell you a fun story. So when I was an organizer for Take Action Minnesota, we held an event very early on in the pandemic. It was a comedy event raising money for performers, and we were also raising money for this project we were working on. And in that meeting, there were people who joined the meeting and decided to write very inappropriate things in the chat. And the reason I'm telling this story is because this is a very common thing that happens for larger meetings, nonprofits, things like that. They're called Zoom bombers, at least that's what I call them. And the reason I bring that up is because every once in a while, you may be in a Zoom meeting where someone either doesn't belong there and they're stuck, maybe they clicked on the wrong room or something like that, or they are actively causing a problem or causing harm. And it is important to know how to move them out of the Zoom room or the Teams room, sorry. So in Teams, if you are ejecting someone from the meeting, you'll look for the meeting window, click on participants to see all the attendees. And once you find their name, you can click on the right click on it to remove it. And you'll see a drop-down box and you'll choose remove. Then the attendee will be removed from the meeting. If it's someone from your local, I would totally encourage you to reach out and say, this is why you were removed from the meeting. If it's just someone who like got stuck in the Zoom room and the Teams room, and for some reason their like feedback is messing up the mic and they got removed for technical reasons, it's not a big deal. Most likely, if you are running a local meeting, whether it be a local meeting or a organizing meeting, if you have to eject someone, it's just because their tech kind of glitched out and they're stuck in between the waiting room and the main room. The other thing that I use most often is the mute all button. This is really important because sometimes you have some folks who don't realize they're off mute and you can hear their background, right? You can hear their kids running around, you can hear them making dinner, you can hear them making a phone call, and it can be super duper distracting. So from the meeting controls, you are going to click or tap the participants icon to reveal a venue. And then the all participants panel will appear on the right. And then you will be able to basically click the mute all button. And then immediately everyone except for you, the host, will be muted. The prompt for people when they get muted basically says that you have been muted by the host. If I plan to mute people a lot, I will often give them a heads up and say, hey, if I mute you, it is not personal. It is just because we are trying to cut down on the background noise. All right, so the other like most important thing for mini locals is how do you capture attendance? In person is pretty easy, right? You connect a face to the name and you kind of just say, yep, I remember seeing them. With virtual, it's a little harder. So what you'll do is you'll click on the participants tab. You'll click on this kind of like 3 dots over here and scroll down to download attendance list, and then it'll be downloaded to your computer. That way you don't have to do kind of the old fashioned way of like writing down names or screenshotting. You can just straight download it and it's super accessible. I like it a lot more than Zoom actually. All right, so on one of my clocks, it says it's 12:54. On one of my other clocks, it says it's 12:52. So I'm gonna give us like 2 minutes for any questions or comments about Teams, because I do know I ran through it really quickly. So please let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, I can show you my dog, but I would like to do questions first.
No, you did awesome, Britt.
Thank you. Right. So who has used Zoom in the past or Teams in the past? And like, what do you like it better than Zoom? Is it more effective than Zoom? Kind of where are you thinking about it?
We're at MDH, we've used it. We use it all the time. We're learning, you know,
Yeah.
There's a nice learning community. It's been a little slow to get equal capability with external partners, invitees, but it's nice. Yeah, I don't know. It seems like WebEx maybe a little bit more stable for some reason. I don't know. So far,
yeah,
it just seems like you can count on it better with a large group, very large group.
Ooh, that's a good point. Yeah,
you know, because maybe it doesn't have to go through the same firewalls and things like that, you know.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Tamara, I saw your hand up, or you go off mute.
Oh, yeah. So I've used all of the platforms. However, my agency, I'm with DHS, we
Mm.
typically use Teams.
Mhm.
I like Teams for smaller internal meetings. And then WebEx for using it for either larger meetings or meetings with external partners. Larger meetings, it's nice so that, or maybe I should say it's the flip side.
Mhm.
Teams is challenging with larger meetings because you can't see all of the faces on the screen.
Yeah.
And you can only see, like, I don't know, 6 or so boxes at a time. So it's a little challenging to see who all is in the space.
Yeah. That's a really good thing to like consider when we're thinking about what platforms to use. Awesome. All right.
And another thing that I would add, if you're sharing a document,
Mhm.
you can't zoom in with Teams, but you can with other
Ooh.
platforms. So just something to think about.
Yeah, that is awesome. Cool. Well, thank you all for listening to my spiel about Teams. The rest of the group has already left and now they're waiting for us. So I'm going to jump back into the main room. Feel free to hang out in here if you want. You'll be kicked out in like 30 seconds or so. But I will see you back in the main room, and feel free to let me know if you have any questions.
Work with these things, but I always forget something. So it's a good thing.
Yeah. I know, that's the thing, right? So most of us are familiar with these apps already, whether it's Zoom or Teams or WebEx. We just wanted to make sure that the focus is on how to engage people, right? And especially after a little over 2 years of being online, we have Zoom fatigue we experience. That's why we're all like off camera, right? Whether we're eating, we're checked out, and we just want to be there. And so these are some of the ways that we can encourage everyone to participate and be there, be a little more present. So, yeah.
It can play also in eroding confidence. Sometimes if the technology comes as a barrier, for some people it becomes a problem on their confidence and presentation too.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of this like organizing and using virtual platforms is really just having the confidence and the flexibility to keep messing up and kind of keep going. It's super easy to get flustered on virtual platforms, especially when you're the only one that's on video and you're like, oh God, everyone's looking at me and I'm messing it up. But for the most part, a lot of people provide grace. So it's very easy to have confidence and figuring it out. That's what I want you to be confident in, not the tech tools, but being willing to figure it out. I think we are at time. So Meron, do you want to close us out and we will get on with our Merry Mondays?
Well, I just want to say thank you everyone for being here and participating. And I think next Monday we have how to organize digitally, Britain, next Monday. And so I encourage and invite everyone to join us then it's kind of like a part 2 of this, right? So now that we've figured out how to do this, how do we organize digitally going forward? So yeah. Again, thank you for joining us, everyone, and you have a lovely day.
Thank you all so much. If you want to check out some of the trainings, the past ones or the current upcoming ones, there is a link in the chat. But it's really great to see all your faces.
Thank you.
Thank you. Give me 2 seconds. Hey, Phil, I'm going to kick you out, but it's great to see you. Goodbye. Okay, let me figure out how to stop recording now.